It was an ordinary winter evening when things started to feel different. The kind of evening where everything seems calm, with the chill of the season keeping the world outside still. I had invited my friend Ethan over to my place. We were planning to catch up, have a couple of drinks, and enjoy the quiet evening. Ethan and I had been close for years, ever since high school, and he had been there for all the major milestones of my life, my wedding, the birth of my daughter, and countless other moments. So, when he called me and said he needed to talk, I didn't hesitate to invite him over. As we sat down in my living room, he seemed unusually tense. The atmosphere between us was more strained than usual, and I couldn't place why. Ethan wasn't the type to hide things from me, he was always blunt and to the point. He told me that he had something important to tell me, but he didn't want to get into it just yet. Naturally, my curiosity got the best of me, and I pushed him to talk. "Come on, man," I said, "what's going on? Just tell me." He hesitated for a second, then leaned back in his chair. "It's nothing bad, just something you might want to know," he said, as if testing the waters. Ethan's hesitation was unusual for him. I started to feel an uncomfortable tightness in my chest. What could it be? I thought. Was something going on with his work? His family? Before he could say anything more, my daughter, Lily, burst into the living room. She was only 7 but was already curious about everything. "Dad, I saw Mom with a man in a car outside." "Who was it?" My heart stopped for a moment. My first thought was, did she make a mistake? Is she just playing around? But Lily looked confused, not like she was making a mistake. "What man?" I asked, trying to sound calm. My voice barely matched the calmness I was trying to project. Lily bit her lip. "I don't know, they were talking, and they looked like they were laughing. He had a black jacket on." I looked at Ethan for a moment, and I could tell by the look on his face that this wasn't something he had planned to tell me. But in that moment, the realization hit me, there was something going on. Something that I hadn't seen before, something that had been under the surface, hidden from me. I just hadn't known it yet. Ethan let out a small sigh and ran his hand through his hair. "Look, man," he began reluctantly. "I didn't want to bring it up, but I saw your wife, Amber, a couple of days ago, and it didn't sit right with me." I froze, trying to take in what he had just said. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "She was with that same guy in the parking lot. I saw them talking, laughing, and the way they were acting, it didn't look like just a friendly conversation. I didn't think it was my place to tell you, but after Lily saw it, I felt like I had to." I sat there, completely still, processing everything. Amber had always been open with me. But now, everything felt uncertain. I didn't know what was going on, but something was definitely wrong. Ethan's words hung in the air, and I struggled to think clearly. My mind was racing, bombarded by 1,000 questions. Who was this man? Why hadn't Amber told me about him? Why hadn't I noticed anything sooner? It felt like a thick fog had descended, clouding my judgment. After Ethan left, I went to bed, trying to process everything. The night was cold, but the warmth of the blankets didn't provide comfort. My mind kept replaying the image of Amber with that man, laughing and talking in the car. My curiosity only deepened. I needed answers. But at the same time, I was terrified of what I might uncover. What if everything I had believed about my life was a lie? Lily had been acting a little too nonchalant about the situation. I couldn't understand why she would even bring it up to me unless it was important. Children are incredibly perceptive, and if she had noticed something, then maybe there was more to it than I realized. But what if she was mistaken? What if it was just a misunderstanding? It was hard to wrap my head around the idea that my wife, the person I trusted most, could be hiding something from me. The following day, I decided to pay more attention to Amber's behavior. I had to know what was really going on. I didn't want to accuse her without more information, but I couldn't ignore the feeling in the pit of my stomach. Something was definitely off. When she came home that evening, I acted as if nothing was wrong. I didn't want to confront her immediately. Something about this situation made me hesitant. Instead, I just watched her. Her movements, the way she spoke, the way she looked at me, it all seemed just a little too rehearsed, like she was trying to maintain a sense of normalcy. It felt like she was hiding something from me. But I couldn't just sit there, silently waiting for answers. I had to make a decision. Was I going to confront her directly, or was I going to give her space to explain things on her own terms? Every instinct told me to go to her, to demand the truth, but part of me was scared. I didn't want to hear what I might find out. The next morning, I decided that I wasn't going to wait around. I had to figure out what had happened while I was away. I had too many different thoughts in my head. Maybe it's just a misunderstanding. Maybe she's been stressed, and this guy is just a colleague. Maybe it's nothing at all. But the more I thought about it, the less I believed that. I knew I had to get to the bottom of this, but I couldn't do it alone. I needed to find someone who could help me, someone who wouldn't be emotionally involved and could give me a clear perspective. I reached out to my old friend, Matt. He and I had been close for years, and I trusted him more than anyone else. He wasn't the type to sugarcoat things, and if I was going to get the truth, it had to be from someone who would tell me exactly what I needed to hear. But when I told him about my suspicions and asked him to help me figure out what was going on, he didn't react the way I expected. "I don't think you should be doing this, man," Matt said. "You know Amber, right? She's never given you a reason to doubt her. You need to be careful. Digging into her life like this can make things worse, especially if you don't have proof." His words stung, but I couldn't help feeling like I was right to be suspicious. How could I just let this go? What if there was more going on than I knew? I had to know the truth, but Matt wasn't on board. And that left me feeling even more isolated. I realized I was alone in this. I was going to have to trust my own instincts and start investigating on my own. There was no turning back. I wasn't sure how deep this rabbit hole went, but I was going to find out. I couldn't let the thought of betrayal cloud my judgment forever. It was time to face the truth, no matter what it might be. A week had passed since Ethan had mentioned seeing Jessica with a man, and though I had tried to push the thoughts away, they never really left. Every time Jessica came home from work, every time I passed her in the hallway, I felt a tightening in my chest, like there was something I just couldn't see. The strange behavior was still there, the awkwardness between us, but she continued to act as though everything was normal. For the most part, I let her be. I didn't want to confront her with half-baked suspicions, but my mind wouldn't let me rest. I had to know what was really going on. The worst part was the constant back and forth in my mind. Some days, I convinced myself that maybe I was imagining things, that maybe I had read too much into things. But other days, everything about Jessica's behavior seemed to confirm my worst fears. She would be unusually distant, always making excuses to be out of the house, and when I asked her about it, she would brush me off with a casual, just work stuff or nothing important. The explanations were always vague, and the more I tried to get closer, the more she pulled away. It was on a Saturday afternoon that everything changed again. I had been cleaning up in the living room when I noticed something strange on the coffee table. They were men's glasses, thick-rimmed, dark frames, the kind that looked expensive. Not something I would have bought. I felt a lump form in my throat. I scanned the room quickly, looking for any sign that they belonged to someone else, maybe a visitor, a friend of Jessica's, someone I hadn't noticed coming over. But no, there was no reason for these glasses to be here. They were clearly out of place. And the thought of them being connected to Jessica sent a wave of panic through me. Who had left them? Had she brought someone into our home? I knew I had to confront her. But my mind kept spinning. Should I say something now? Should I wait? I felt paralyzed by indecision. It was becoming clear that there was more going on than just a few suspicious moments. There was a pattern here, a series of small things that I had ignored, but no more. I couldn't let this go. I took the glasses, stuffed them in my pocket, and waited for Jessica to come home. When she walked through the door later that evening, I was already sitting on the couch, pretending to be absorbed in a book. I was trying to calm myself, but inside, I was a storm of confusion and frustration. Jessica noticed me right away, as she always did. "Hey, you're home early," she said, her voice chipper, as if nothing was wrong. "Yeah, just felt like relaxing," I replied, my voice a little more strained than usual. She kicked off her shoes and headed to the kitchen. I was sitting there, holding my breath, trying to make sense of what to do next. I couldn't just spring it on her. Not without giving her a chance to explain. But I couldn't ignore the glasses in my pocket either. I had to address it. I stood up and walked to the kitchen where she was unpacking some groceries. I held the glasses out in front of me, and her eyes immediately flickered to them. There was a brief pause, and I saw her face freeze for a split second before she regained her composure. "Where did you get these?" I asked, my voice steady but carrying the weight of suspicion. She turned to look at me, her expression unreadable. "What do you mean?" she said, feigning innocence. "Those aren't mine." "They must be." "I don't know, maybe one of the neighbors dropped them off." I could feel my pulse quickening, my mind racing with possibilities. I hadn't noticed any neighbors dropping by recently. It was just another lie. I wasn't going to let it slide. "Really? Because these aren't mine. They're men's glasses. And they definitely don't belong to anyone I know," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, though my heart was pounding in my chest. She stared at the glasses for a moment, then turned back to the counter, beginning to unpack groceries again as if nothing was wrong. "I don't know, Adam. I must have missed it. I haven't had anyone over, you know that." I couldn't help but feel a surge of anger and disbelief. How could she be so casual about it? How could she act like everything was fine when clearly, something wasn't? But instead of confronting her with the rising tide of emotions inside me, I made a decision. I had to play this carefully. If I just blurted out everything I suspected, it might just push her further away. "All right," I said, trying to keep my tone controlled. "But I'm not dropping this. I want to know the truth, Jessica. I won't ignore it anymore." Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, there was a flicker of something in them. I wasn't sure what it was, guilt, fear, or maybe just a momentary hesitation. Then she quickly looked away and began putting away the rest of the groceries. "I'm tired, Adam," she said quietly. "Can we talk about this later? I just don't have the energy for another argument." I didn't push her further. Instead, I nodded and left the room. But I knew I couldn't stop now. I wasn't going to just let this slide, not after everything. The glasses were more than just a piece of evidence, they were a clue in a puzzle that I had to solve. As the evening wore on, I realized that the real emotional weight of the situation was hitting me in waves. I was angry, yes, but I also felt this crushing sadness. How had I let it get this far? How had I been so blind to the signs? The trust one had in Jessica, in our marriage, was now something fragile, something I didn't know if I could ever rebuild. The next morning, I went out into the garage and began working on one of my winter projects, a piece of old furniture I'd been restoring. It had always been a hobby of mine, buying unusual furniture, fixing it up, and selling it. It gave me peace, a way to clear my head, even in the most difficult of times. But today, it was different. It wasn't just about the restoration. It wasn't just about the furniture. It was about rebuilding something, my life, my sense of self, my understanding of what had happened. I took a photo of the furniture I was working on and added it to my growing photo album of restored pieces. Each photo was a reminder of the things I could control, even if my marriage was spiraling out of control. I had to hold on to something. The calmness of working on my project helped me think clearly, but I couldn't stop feeling like I was walking on a tightrope. The more I waited, the more I felt like I was just waiting for the inevitable fall. The glasses, Jessica's lies, the tension in the air, all of it was leading somewhere. I wasn't sure where, but I was preparing myself for whatever came next. The more I tried to hold on to the idea of waiting, the more I realized there was only one thing left to do. I needed to gather the evidence. I needed to prove it. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was in the workshop, working on a piece of old furniture I had picked up from a local estate sale. Winter had fully settled in, and I found myself spending more time restoring antique pieces, buying old furniture, fixing it up, and selling it had become my escape. It allowed me to focus, to keep my mind occupied on something other than the tension building between Amber and me. But that afternoon, everything I had been trying to ignore came crashing down. As I was sanding a piece of wood, trying to focus on the rhythmic sound of the sandpaper, I heard the unmistakable sound of tires crunching in the gravel driveway. My first thought was that Amber must have been home early from running errands. But then I heard a knock at the front door. I frowned, wiping my hands on my jeans, wondering who would be visiting unannounced. I walked to the door and paused just before I opened it. I could feel the tension creeping up again, a feeling I couldn't shake since the day I first learned of Amber's possible betrayal. But when I opened the door, I didn't expect what I saw. Standing there on the porch was Tyler, the same man I had heard about in Amber's hidden text messages. The one she had been seeing behind my back. His presence was a jolt to my system. He looked like he belonged there, standing confidently in the doorway with a casual, almost eager smile on his face, as though he had every right to be there. "Hey, is Amber home?" he asked, his tone friendly, a little too casual, but still warm. I stood there frozen for a moment. My first instinct was to shout, to demand to know what the hell he was doing at my house. But I didn't. I just stared at him, trying to maintain composure, trying to act like I didn't know what this was. Before I could say anything, I heard Amber's voice behind me. "Adam," she called out from the living room. "Who's at the door?" I turned just in time to see her walking toward me, but the look in her eyes instantly told me something was wrong. She wasn't surprised to see Tyler there. She didn't flinch or hesitate. Her smile was a little too bright, a little too forced. Tyler stepped forward with a wide grin. "Hey, Amber. I was hoping to surprise you, but it looks like I caught you off guard." He laughed, as though everything was completely normal. Amber's face faltered, and for the briefest second, I saw the panic in her eyes. But then she quickly recovered, her expression shifting to something that looked almost rehearsed. She smiled, but it was the kind of smile you give when you're caught doing something you're not supposed to. "You must have the wrong address. I think you're looking for someone else." I stared at her, trying to process the absurdity of it. "The wrong address?" I repeated, my voice dangerously calm. I looked at Tyler, then back at her. "This is the right address, isn't it? You've been seeing him, haven't you?" For a split second, I saw something flicker across her face, guilt, fear, maybe both, but she immediately masked it. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice shaking now. "This is just a misunderstanding." Tyler seemed a bit taken aback by Amber's quick dismissal, and he glanced at her, then back at me, his eyes shifting awkwardly. I guess I've got the wrong house." "Sorry about that, man," he said, backing away, clearly uncomfortable with the tension. "I'll just, go." Amber stepped forward and gave him a quick, awkward wave. "Yeah, sorry. I think there's been some mix-up. Have a good one." I watched as Tyler walked away down the porch steps, still looking uncertain. As soon as he turned to walk down the driveway, I could feel the heat rising in my chest, my mind spinning out of control. The way she had acted, so defensive, so quick to brush off what was happening right in front of her eyes, made me sick. This was it. This was the moment. I had to do something. I turned to Amber, my voice low and cold. "Who the hell was that, Amber?" I asked, my words sharp. "And don't lie to me. I'm done pretending I don't know what's going on." She froze, her eyes wide with panic. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out at first. Her eyes flickered nervously to the door, and then she glanced at me, trying to figure out what to say. "Tyler's just someone from work," she said quickly, her voice trembling. "It's nothing. He's just a friend." Her voice was rushed, almost too rushed, as if she were trying to convince both herself and me. I didn't say anything at first. I just stared at her, feeling the anger surge through me. "A friend?" I repeated, my voice low and shaking with disbelief. "You've been seeing him for months, and you're telling me he's just a friend?" I could see her hands shaking slightly, but she refused to make eye contact. "Adam, I'm so sorry. Please just let me explain." She reached for my arm, but I pulled away sharply. "No, you don't get to explain this away," I said, my voice finally cracking. "You don't get to lie to me anymore, Amber. I saw it. I heard it. I know what's been going on. You've been seeing him behind my back, and you lied to me. Don't try to make it sound like it's nothing." Her face crumpled, and I could see the tears forming in her eyes. "Adam, please, just let me explain. It was a mistake. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I was just..." "Just what?" I interrupted, feeling the anger and hurt overwhelm me. "What could possibly explain this? What excuse can you give me now? You've been lying to me, sneaking around, and now I'm supposed to just forgive you?" She took a step back, looking defeated, her face wet with tears. But I didn't feel the comfort of sympathy. I felt the cold burn of betrayal, of everything I thought was real crumbling in front of me. "I'm sorry," she whispered through her tears. "I never wanted to hurt you." I couldn't speak. I just stood there, the weight of everything crashing down on me. She had betrayed me. And now she was minimizing it, downplaying everything as if it was just a fleeting moment, as if she wasn't tearing apart the foundation of our marriage with every word she spoke. I shook my head, unable to speak for a moment. My whole body was shaking now. I wanted to yell, to scream at her, to make her feel the weight of the destruction she had caused. But instead, I just stood there, staring at the woman who had once been my whole world. "I can't do this anymore, Amber," I finally managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "I can't pretend that everything's okay. I can't forgive this. I don't even know who you are anymore." She started to cry then, her face crumpling in a way that broke my heart but also left me feeling cold. I had never seen her like this before, she had always been so composed, so in control. And now, standing there in front of me, I realized just how much of a stranger she had become. "I'm sorry," she whispered again, her voice barely audible. "Please, Adam, don't leave me." But I couldn't move. I couldn't find the strength to comfort her or make any promises. The truth was too painful, and the betrayal too deep. The days after Amber's confession were a blur. I couldn't sleep, couldn't think straight. My mind was constantly racing, replaying the moments before I discovered the truth, before I caught her red-handed with Tyler in our home. The lies, the sneaking around, the empty words, it all felt like a bad dream. And with every passing hour, the anger inside me only grew. The love I once felt for her had turned into something colder, something darker. I had always thought I knew Amber. We'd built a life together, a marriage based on trust, or so I thought. But now, it seemed like everything we had built was a lie. How could she do this to me? How could she betray me with someone I didn't even know? The truth was, I didn't want to just sit in the wreckage of my own broken heart. I didn't want to be the one to pick up the pieces and move on, pretending like everything would somehow be okay. No, this was something deeper than that. She had destroyed me, and now I was going to make her feel it. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. She didn't get to ruin everything I believed in and walk away unscathed. The thought of revenge consumed me. I wasn't the type of person to lash out recklessly. I'd always been calm, logical, and careful about my decisions. But this? This was different. My mind wasn't thinking clearly anymore. It was consumed by the idea of making her regret everything she had done. I didn't want to just get even, I wanted her to understand the weight of what she had done, to feel the pain, the humiliation, and the anger that had been brewing inside me ever since I first learned the truth. I needed to act quickly. The longer I let Amber pretend like nothing had changed, the more my resentment festered. I wasn't going to let her deceive me any longer, and I certainly wasn't going to let Tyler think he had gotten away with it either. The first step of my plan was simple. I needed to confront her in a way that would rattle her, make her feel the weight of her lies. But I also needed to be strategic about it. She had already shown me that she was good at lying, good at keeping up appearances. If I confronted her again, just like before, she might try to play the victim. She might even try to manipulate the situation to her advantage. No, this time, it had to be different. I wasn't going to just talk to her. I wasn't going to beg for an explanation or apologize for being too suspicious. This time, I was going to make it clear that I was in control. And to do that, I had to set the stage, create the perfect opportunity to make her understand just how serious I was. I started small. I began subtly changing my behavior. I stopped pretending like everything was fine. I stopped asking about her day, about her plans, about her so-called friends. I started spending more time away from the house, more time on my own. I visited old friends, went out for long drives, and spent even more time in the workshop, restoring my furniture. I kept the business of restoring and selling antique pieces going as if everything in my life was just business as usual. But I wasn't just escaping, I was plotting. Every time I fixed a broken chair or polished a tarnished table, I thought about Amber's betrayal. Every stroke of my work was an act of defiance, a reminder to myself that I wasn't going to sit idly by while she destroyed everything we had. I kept a photo album of the restored pieces, each photo a small victory in my mind. It was a symbol of my own resilience, of what I could rebuild after the destruction she caused. But it wasn't just about the furniture. It was about the plan. I needed to show Amber that I could hurt her just as much as she had hurt me. One night, after a few drinks, I texted Tyler. I didn't want to make this too easy for him, but I knew I had to make my move. I wasn't going to confront him directly. No, I was smarter than that. Instead, I reached out with a simple message: we need to talk. You've messed with the wrong person. It wasn't much, but I knew it would rattle him. And that's exactly what happened. He replied quickly, almost apologetically, "Who is this? I don't know what you're talking about." I could feel a grin tug at the corners of my mouth. It wasn't over yet. It had just begun. A few days later, I arranged a meeting with him. I didn't want to do it in person, I wasn't ready for a confrontation, not yet. So instead, I invited him to a location where I could control the conversation. A small, quiet bar on the edge of town. The kind of place where people could have a drink, keep to themselves, and not worry about being overheard. When I walked in, I saw him immediately. He was sitting at a corner table, nervously tapping his fingers on the glass. He hadn't expected me to show up. He thought he had gotten away with everything. As I approached him, I saw the look on his face, a mix of confusion and regret. He didn't know what was coming. "Tyler," I said, sitting down across from him. I kept my voice steady, calm, the way I always tried to appear in control. I'm not here to make small talk. I'm here because you've crossed a line, and I'm going to make sure you understand that. He opened his mouth, probably to defend himself, but I cut him off. You've been seeing my wife. You've been sneaking around, thinking I wouldn't find out. Well, here's the thing. I know everything. And I'm not just going to sit back and let this go. Tyler's face turned pale. I could see the regret in his eyes now. He had made a mistake. He had no idea who he was dealing with. You've hurt me, Tyler. And now, I'm going to make sure you feel the consequences, I continued, my voice low. This isn't just about Amber. This is about making sure no one ever thinks they can get away with something like this again. The power I felt in that moment was intoxicating. This wasn't about getting even, it was about making sure Amber and Tyler knew that I wouldn't let them get away with what they'd done. The revenge was in the air, in the quiet satisfaction of knowing that I had control. It wasn't over. It had just begun. And with that, I walked away from Tyler, leaving him alone in that bar, realizing that the game had shifted. The days following my meeting with Tyler were nothing short of exhilarating. I could feel the power surging through me every time I thought about how I had turned everything around. I had made them both feel the weight of their actions. I had exposed the truth to Tyler, broken his confidence, made him question everything he thought was secure. The relief of knowing that I was in control felt so sweet, so satisfying, that for a while, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Amber, on the other hand, was spiraling. She had no idea what I had planned, what I had set in motion. At first, she tried to apologize, pleading with me, promising she'd never see him again, claiming it was all a mistake. I didn't even look her in the eyes when she said it. Her words were meaningless now. The trust between us had shattered, and nothing she said could ever fix that. So, I let her wallow in her own regret. I let her suffer as I held all the cards. I ignored her attempts to reach out, ignored her teary-eyed apologies, the forced smiles, the desperate acts of kindness. She wasn't going to get me back. She had forfeited any chance at redemption the moment she lied to me, the moment she chose Tyler over our life, over our marriage. And as much as I loathed myself for admitting it, a part of me relished the chaos. I enjoyed watching her crumble. I could hear the fear in her voice when I spoke to her, the tremor in her hands when she tried to touch me. I wasn't just punishing her, I was relishing every second of it. The sense of power, of control, felt like a drug. Every apology, every tear, none of it meant a thing to me. I had won. But then, something began to change inside me. As the days dragged on, I found myself increasingly restless. My mind, once clear and focused, started to spiral. It wasn't the guilt or regret that gnawed at me, no, I didn't feel bad about what I had done. I had earned this. But there was something else eating away at me. Something darker. It was a gnawing emptiness. A wildness, a craving for more that I couldn't shake. I was waking up in the middle of the night, heart racing, as if I were chasing something just out of reach. The sense of control that had felt so powerful now felt hollow, like I had taken a step into a place where I couldn't find my way back. I began to notice it in the quiet moments, when I was alone, when I wasn't actively tearing down Amber's life or watching her struggle. It started to feel like I was constantly waiting for something, like a pressure was building inside me, ready to explode. I could feel the anger bubbling under the surface, the wildness rising. It was as if the satisfaction I had once felt from my revenge was fleeting. What was the point of destroying everything if there was no closure, no real sense of finality? I had shattered Amber and Tyler's relationship, but in doing so, I had shattered myself, too. I had let the darkness consume me. And now, I didn't know how to stop it. One night, after Amber had begged me again for forgiveness, I snapped. She had been quiet for days, too quiet, waiting for some sign from me, some glimmer of hope that we could fix things. I knew it was over, but she still didn't. She still thought I could forgive her, that things could somehow go back to normal. I stood in front of her, watching her plead with me, her eyes bloodshot from crying. She looked broken, small. And part of me felt something stir, a flicker of empathy, maybe even a sliver of the love I had once felt for her. But then, the anger took over again, and I could feel the wildness in me taking control. "Amber," I said, my voice cold and hard. "You don't get to have anything from me anymore. You've destroyed this. You've destroyed us. And now you're left with nothing. You don't get to ask for my forgiveness. You don't get to undo what you did." Her face crumpled, but I didn't care. I didn't care how much it hurt her anymore. I wanted her to feel the pain. I wanted to see her suffer. In the weeks that followed, I distanced myself even more from Amber, but the tension inside me only grew. I spent more time in the workshop, restoring my furniture, working late into the night. But it wasn't the same anymore. The satisfaction I had once felt from turning broken pieces into something beautiful had faded. The quiet rhythm of sanding and polishing no longer brought me peace. The emptiness I had been trying to fill with revenge, with the destruction of everything that once mattered to me, kept pulling me deeper into a place I couldn't escape from. I was becoming a person I didn't recognize. My desire for control had turned into an insatiable hunger, a wildness that consumed me. I sat in the quiet of my workshop one night, staring at the half-finished piece of furniture in front of me. I had restored so many of these broken objects, fixed them, made them new again. But this one was different. It was a reflection of me now. A reminder that no matter how much I tried to fix the pieces, something would always remain broken. In the end, revenge had brought me no relief. I had torn apart their lives, but in doing so, I had torn apart my own. And now, I was left to face the consequences of my own actions, a man consumed by his own rage, unable to find the peace he thought he was seeking.